What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Paul Brown and today we're going to take a look at one of the hottest prospects in the UFC today. Caio Borralho has been tearing it up in the UFC's middleweight division since he signed just a couple of years back. He is now 6-0 in the promotion and he headlines this weekend at the UFC Apex when he takes on the number 5 ranked killer gorilla Jared Cannonier. It's been a very fast-paced rise to stardom for young Borralho. At 31 years of age, his best years are still ahead of him. And in my mind, he has absolutely shown the potential to be up there competing for the middleweight title in the not too distant future. Borralho first came to prominence in late 2021. He appeared twice on the Dana White Contender Series. He picked up a decision victory in his first outing on the show when he won after 3 rounds against Aaron Jeffrey, but he did not get his UFC contract. He returned just a month later for a second appearance on the show, this time fighting at light heavyweight against Jesse Murray. A first round knockout finish was more than enough to impress the bigwigs and get him signed to the UFC. He had his first 3 UFC fights in 2022, winning all 3 of them by decision, taking out names such as Omar Gadziev, Armen Petrosyan and Mahmoud Muradov. This was a bit of a settling in period for Borralho. As is to be expected when you come in from the smaller leagues into the UFC, it takes a little bit of time to find your feet for a lot of fighters. But he definitely looked more than impressive against some very experienced opponents. His third fight against Muradov in particular was a big test. Muradov was competing in his 37th pro bout at that point. Moving into 2023 and the level of competition stepped up another notch for Borralho. In April of that year he stepped in to face Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, who himself at the time was 6-3 in the octagon and had been in there with experienced fighters himself like Ovin St. Preux, Jimmy Crute, Modestas Bukauskas and Shamil Gamzatov. Now this was an ideal matchup for Borralho to showcase his striking skills. At 5'10" tall, he's not the most physically imposing UFC middleweight. In fact, nearly all of his opponents have had a height advantage over him, but he's supremely athletic and due to his fighting style, he fights in that slightly bladed stance. He's very, very quick on his feet, very nimble, very elusive. He's great at getting in and out, and an opponent like Oleksiejczuk who's going to stand and bang with him was an ideal showcase for him and for his skills. Having won his opening 3 fights by decision, he looked eager to step his foot on the gas and really bring the fight to Oleksiejczuk. He outstruck the Polish power puncher over the opening round. And we got some insight into exactly how well-rounded Borralho is when he managed to get Oleksiejczuk to the floor. He worked his way to the back of his opponent, cinched up a rear naked choke and picked up his first finish inside the octagon. His 5th UFC fight came late in 2023 when he took on Abus Magomedov. This fight proved to be a very intense tactical battle, particularly over the first 2 rounds. Not as much activity as we've come to see over some of Caio Borralho's fights. Both fighters looked to be playing the patient game, waiting for their opportunities, waiting for the perfect opening to strike. Toward the end of the second round, we saw Borralho start to step on the gas a little bit, started landing a few more impactful shots on Magomedov. And when they went into that 3rd round, he looked like he had 3, 4 or 5 more gears that he could slide into. Magomedov struggled to keep up with him. Borralho began to put more and more of a pace onto his opponent, won that 3rd round definitely dominantly, and he walked away with a very impressive decision victory against another fighter who has had over 30 professional fights. In May of this year, we saw him fight in Rio de Janeiro against Scotland's Paul Craig. Now Craig is somewhat of a big name. He came down from the light heavyweight division where he had picked up some high profile victories, but this performance by Caio Borralho, without doubt his best to date. He looked to have a massive speed advantage over his Scottish opponent. He was leading the dance from the opening bell, using his jab to great effect, straight left down the pipe, caused lots of damage. Paul Craig looked like he was never able to get into the striking exchanges. He became hesitant, he found himself moving backwards, and Caio Borralho just calm, patient, sharp and precise with his striking, utterly dominant over the course of that opening round. Paul Craig began to fight more desperately, numerous attempts to pull guard, but no joy. And Caio Borralho just gradually increased the intensity and turned the screw on his opponent over and over and over. A couple of minutes into the 2nd round, he knocked out Paul Craig to pick up the best victory of his career. So he's now 6-0, he's unbeaten, he's been making waves, making a name for himself. He finds himself sitting at number 12 in the rankings. UFC's middleweight division is kind of in a state of flux at the moment. We've seen the title change hands on a couple of occasions. Adesanya losing to Strickland, who lost to Duplessis. Duplessis has now defended that title. So there's a handful of fighters floating around the top of the division who have already been champion, and maybe there's not so much clarity on where they're planning to go next in their careers. And Caio Borralho represents that next generation of challengers. I believe he's well-rounded enough and talented enough to develop further and mix it with those guys at the top end of the division over the next couple of years. This fight he has this weekend against Jared Cannonier is a golden opportunity to break into the top 5. Cannonier's ranked 5th. A win here would jump Borralho all the way up to the top 5. This is without doubt the biggest test he'll face in his career so far. Cannonier, of course, fought for the title in 2022 when he took on Israel Adesanya at UFC 276. But the 40-year-old has only fought 3 times since. He bounced back late in 2022 to pick up a split decision victory over Sean Strickland. Following summer, he got a decision victory over Marvin Vettori. And then after a year off, he came back earlier this year to face Nasruddin Imavov, who finished him in the 4th round. Now, this is just a 2-month turnaround for the 40-year-old fighter. And that's an interesting aspect to this fight, with no real prospect of him making his way to a title fight again. What kind of Jared Cannonier are we going to see in the octagon on Saturday night? I think he's being set up as a sacrificial lamb here by the UFC to get Caio Borralho into the top end of the middleweight rankings. And let's look at that top 5. Should Caio Borralho take that 5th place from Jared Cannonier? Immediately in front of him, he's got Nasruddin Imavov in 4th, who is matched to fight Brendan Allen very soon. In 3rd, you've got Robert Whittaker, who is matched to fight Khamzat Chimaev. You've got Israel Adesanya in 2nd, who just fought for the title and is most likely going to face some time off. And you've got Sean Strickland at number 1, who's probably the next contender, if Dana White is to be believed. So between this weekend's fight and then the upcoming Imavov Allen and Khamzat Chimaev v Robert Whittaker fights, the dice at the top of the middleweight division are going to be rolled over the next couple of months. There's pros and cons to Caio Borralho winning this weekend. Obviously that victory would be massive and would jumpstart his career and land him in that top 5. Sometimes with a younger fighter, they might be better served taking a slightly slower route. 1 or 2 more fights, and more importantly 1 or 2 more training camps to develop his game further, round out that skill set, might leave him better set to then challenge the likes of Whittaker and Adesanya. But if he gets his hand raised this weekend, he might not get the window of opportunity to develop at the pace that he wants. Skill set wise then, let's look at Caio Borralho and see what he does really, really well. He fights predominantly southpaw. I heard an interesting quote from one of the commentators on one of his fights, I think it was Brendan Fitzgerald, mentioned that he wasn't a natural southpaw and that he switched to training and fighting as a southpaw after watching Conor McGregor when he was younger. I'm not sure how accurate that is. I'm not sure how much I believe it, because he doesn't slide between stances really. He fights pretty much just as a southpaw, so I don't know. Let's see. But he looks spectacular. He looks fast. As I mentioned, he's not the largest physical specimen of a middleweight. He is very light on his feet. He fights in that bladed stance, almost kind of side on. And what that does is it allows him to slide in and out. And he is very fleet of foot. He can get in, let shots go, and get back out of boxing range again. So he's very sharp, dangerous, precise with those hands. He uses calf kicks very well, outside calf kicks too, which is something you don't see a hell of a lot from a lot of southpaws. And although he has predominantly displayed his striking skills in his UFC career to date, he is very well rounded, having picked up a judo black belt and a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt over the course of the last few years. We saw in the fights against Oleksiejczuk and Abus Magomedov how well he can control the back and the killer instinct that he has when the fight hits the floor. All in all, this is a fight this weekend that has a hell of a lot riding on it. The future of the UFC middleweight division, like I said, it's in that state of flux. We got quite a lot of older fighters taking up those top spots. A couple of those guys are going to drift out of the way over the next 12 to 18 months, and there will be an opening for whichever prospect is able to put his hand up and lay claim to that number 1 challenger spot. Give me your picks for the fights, guys. How do you think this one's going to go? Is Caio Borralho ready for a test of this magnitude, or is Jared Cannonier just going to prove too much for him to handle at this stage of his career? Stick your predictions in the comments below. Get involved in the discussion. Do me a favour, like, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time. Thank you.